Lots of folks ask me about how I make my videos. The way I make them has changed over time, but I'll share with you today how I make them now. Let's start with where I shoot my videos. My studio and office mostly. I've created an environment where I can use different areas of the room for backgrounds. I can move stuff around, including my desk, to suit my purposes. I chose a neutral light gray wall and white furniture to create a light and airy look, which also works as an all-around reflector, which is great to minimize shadows. Next, the gear. Let's start with lighting. I use a combination of two things, window light and continuous fluorescent light with daylight balanced bulbs. I shoot most of my videos during the day, so I get lots of daylight. Then I use these two fluorescent continuous light banks with softboxes on them. These are Flora lights from Linco. There are 6 light bulbs in each bank, so they put out quite a bit of light, and I like the softboxes because they provide a good soft light. The combination of daylight and softbox light provide me with a good, soft, natural lighting look. The only challenge here is white balance in the camera. I'll go over that in a minute though. Onto the camera and lens. I typically use my Nikon D810 and a good crisp lens. A few of my favorites are the 24-70 f2.8, the 85mm f1.8 prime, or the 105mm f2.8 D prime. I put the setup on an inexpensive tripod. I got this one from Amazon. As for settings, I shoot in 1080p at 60 frames per second, usually at the high quality setting. I shoot in manual at 1/60th of a second and usually at f2.8 so that I can blur out the background. ISO sensitivity depends upon my lighting situation. I mentioned white balance a minute ago too. White balance is a little tricky. I use the daylight balanced fluorescent setting, but I fine tune it for the day. And then for the even trickier part, focusing. I have made this Snapchick dummy, a light stand and 2 clamps. I make this about my height and I put it where I will stand, and I put one of the clamps at eye level and the other, sometimes I put where I want the bottom of the frame to be. Then I compose my shot and autofocus on that light stand, and then I switch the camera over to manual focus so that it doesn't refocus when I move the light stand. I just have to be careful where I stand because I need to stand exactly where the light stand was because, as I mentioned before, I typically use a shallow depth of field. Also, I stand still while I'm making my videos. I might move my head, but I can't move around a whole lot because autofocus during video on DSLRs isn't really useful quite yet. At least it isn't up to the standard that I'd require. They tend to hunt for focus, which I just don't have a sense of humor for, so I need to stay within my depth of field. Now let me pause here because some of you may be wondering why I don't use my new Nikon D500, which can shoot in 4K. Good question. I have shot a few things in 4K, but basically, I'm simply not ready to make the switch. Now, audio. For a while, I've used a lavalier mic. This is the Rode SmartLav Plus. I plug it into my iPhone and there's an app. There is a free version of the app and a paid version. I've been using the paid version for 2 reasons. You can adjust the levels in it, and you can also transfer more than one audio file to the computer at a time, both of which are quite useful for me. So now for video editing. All of the files go onto my computer and I first edit audio. I use Audacity. It's a free software you can download. I use the compressor effect to clean it up, and then I import the audio and video files into Final Cut Pro X. I sync the audio and the video using multicam. There are other ways to do it, but I sometimes have multiple camera angles, so my process is just to simply always use multicam. Once I'm done editing, I send the video through compressor, and then I upload it. So that's my story. That's how I make my videos in the studio. There are many different ways to make videos. There are different ways that I've made videos. This way works for me right now. I'll put links to some of the stuff that I use in my video making pursuits in the description below so that you can check them out for your own videography.